So the name actually, nobody ever asks me about this, so thank you for asking. The name is actually based on one of my favorite music albums of all time. It was called Happiness Is. But I kind of switched it up to Hippiness Is because I think incorporating some like grounding elements into our lives that people might associate as like hippy dippy ways is really important to keep us like grounded and stable and happy. So, yeah.
I'm curious, can you say who the band is or the musician? Because I don't think I heard of a Happiness. I know of a movie called Happiness, but not of an album.
Absolutely. The band is called Taking Back Sunday. They're kind of like an emo alternative band, kind of on the rock side. And that album just it was really important for me during my early 20s. And it really helped me get through a lot. So, yeah, it stayed with me for quite some time.
Okay. So I guess it kind of came in that I guess what they call the new wave of that era where like I guess other bands that are more regarded it came in that but it kind of didn't catch on as big as like let's say Morrissey or any of those other bands, and is that what happened? They kind of were there but they kind of didn't catch that big wave of attention.
Absolutely. And that genre and the smaller bands under that umbrella are my absolute favorites. So, yeah, if you're ever looking for kind of underground alternative, I'm your girl.
Okay, I probably will do that because in a way I do the same thing, but with movies and comics and books. Like I kind of come more from that direction, but I'm the same. Like, in my Substack, I am about that. I'm always very fascinated by how culture happens, and you discover these things like you did with Happiness with that band, Taking Back Sunday, and you're like, why didn't these guys catch on as big as these other guys? Like, it's the same, or I would even argue it's better, but for whatever reason, the cultural forces manipulate, imaginate, and make that happen. So I am about that. I'm very fascinated with that. So I totally get that. In a way, I guess we have some common ground. But I guess what you post about and what I post about indirectly touch on the same subjects. And I guess you can get into the topic of the chat that we are doing here, which is I guess responding versus reacting. Like when one is being triggered, one is like conditioning or programming, and the other one comes from a place of self-knowledge and deliberately choosing to react versus just sort of like a knee-jerk reaction. And I guess that's what you mostly do. Like that's a large part of your content is about. Yes.
Yeah, so I write a lot about learning how to be present in the body. How our body tells us what it needs, especially in our nervous systems, and also how to verbalize that and understand it in a way that propels us forward instead of keeping us locked in these like reactions or old narratives that maybe keep us stuck.
Okay. Can you give us a little example when you talk about verbalizing that, like verbalizing these sensations that your body gives you, or like I guess it feels like aches or like pains or things like that. Is that what that is, you mean?
It absolutely could be. It's a big process learning how to tap into it. I can tell you from my personal experience, I started to learn about it only when my body truly shut down. I was working, overworking, I was in school doing, 60 hours a week, and all these little telltale signs like fatigue or headaches or panic attacks, they kept snowballing until it was a bigger issue where my nervous system finally said, okay, tap out, we're done. So at that point, I really looked back and I was like, wow, my body was telling me for a long time that this wasn't sustainable. So now I like to talk a lot about, how to notice those signs so that people can avoid, getting chronically ill.
Oh, okay. We kind of lost the connection for a second or so, but you're good now. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so my intention is just to kind of spread somatic awareness so that everybody has the opportunity to learn about or the skills about how to listen to their bodies before it's too late.
Absolutely. Yeah, very relatable. I think we all have that. We all have like injuries that just keep nagging, that don't go away or that get worse with time, or like you said, maybe a headache, which you think maybe you need medicine, but what you really is some unaddressed thing, like something. It could be something as simple as something someone said that you tried to shrug off, but it really didn't. It really bothered you, and because you didn't say anything or do something, it just manifests as a headache. Or I'm convinced a lot of health problems. That's what they are, just unaddressed trauma, unaddressed, like, or maybe micro trauma, like just these micro trauma just keeps building and building and building, and eventually, like you said, like your body shuts down or you have a really serious injury because of
Absolutely.
the collective issue, the collective number of things of like in the workplace. I guess taking time off is not a, it's a problem, or saying that you don't feel. I mean, we're better now about addressing mental health, but there's still something of a stigma. It's still a little bit of a stigma attached to that. Like we're in a better place now than say 20, 30 years ago, but it's still something of an issue. It's still like to say that I don't feel well, or like I like to kind of just, stop and, just be quiet for a little while. Like little things like that make a big difference, but it's still something of an issue to just say those things.
Yeah, it's not widely accepted in society yet. We're still in the culture where it's push, push, push. But we're only human and we have limits.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. You're coming in a little. I cannot hear you very well. I don't know if it's on my side or yours. I'm checking with the volume.
Let me
I don't
see.
know, maybe.
Well, just let me know if it cuts out at all. My side
Okay.
looks okay.
All right, then let's see what we can do then to keep going. Yeah, I come from a similar direction. I don't quite do write about that on my Substack. In an indirect way, I do, and more in having to do with like paying attention to the opinions of others, like when you value the opinions of others over like your own, what your body is telling you, and how that can not only, to give you the health problems that you have, the mental health problems that you have, but also how it restricts creativity, how it restricts the flow of ideas, the flow of things, because there's something that you're thinking of saying or doing in the workplace, but you don't do it because maybe you've just reached a point where you don't even want to speak up anymore, or you're afraid of what they're gonna say, or any number of things, but you just don't speak up. And it could be the idea that could lead to like, maybe improving the work situation, something that can save the company money, make work more efficient. So it's about that, about just learning to like value less the opinions of others, not giving value to so much to opinions, which are just opinions. It's just it doesn't it maybe depending on how we're brought up, we think of it as like a rule or a law or something, instead of it's just an opinion. It doesn't it may have value or it may not, but it doesn't make your opinion any less valid.
Absolutely. And I think that point exactly ties so well into what we wanted to talk about today, because taking things personally um, is a real trigger for reacting rather than responding to a situation.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. That's something that took a little more time for me to like to realize that. But I remember, like, I guess there was a time when I would wake up and I would feel like tired. Like I would wake up tired, and I'm like, how can this be? Like I just literally slept for like 6, 7 hours, and or just feeling like you said, headaches or feeling tense. And it's like, I'm not doing anything. So where's this coming from? And the idea, when I started reading books on personal growth, the idea that it was just unaddressed trauma or not speaking, just something as simple as not speaking up, that sort of got me interested in learning more. At first, I rejected that. I was like, well, I can't be, like with men in particular, it's a little harder. Like men have a harder time admitting these things, that that there could be some, like that the macho thing is still predominant, endures. So the idea of like, you know um little things getting to you, I guess you should it's still something of a, I guess, how would I say, a stigma, among men. But I was like, if when I quietly started just, not saying anything, not just quietly, contemplating that idea, it's like, well, what if there is something to that? What if maybe you are being too sensitive? What if you're overreacting to things? And I started contemplating that. That alone actually started making me feel better. Like a lot of the tension went away, a lot of like like feeling the headaches went away, because I was just, well, okay, yeah, so maybe there is the the spoken thing, but there's the unspoken thing, the thing that you don't acknowledge that manifests on your body. On your, it's like, okay, so, well, let's say this is a thing. I'm still not gonna 100% admit it to myself, but if I were to theoretically do something about it, what can I do? Like how do you start analyzing your own thought process, like how is your mind made up? And that led me down that whole rabbit hole of like conditioning, how you're conditioned to do these things, how you're conditioned by the aggregate of school, society, work, and all those things. And how I don't know, like it's kind of bleak to talk about because I don't know, like the workplace doesn't really look like it's going to change anytime soon. So it's like the only thing is you have to change yourself. You have to change how you perceive things, how you read situations, social situations, how you react to the information, and changing it, reframing it in such a way that you're not manipulated by that, you're not triggered, so that you don't react. Instead, you respond, and it's like, is this worth me getting upset about? Is this like going to do something for me? Like, is there a reason to genuinely be angry and upset about this? And then just from there, that's where the whole response comes, the responding. You're like, I started looking into that, into techniques of like, counting to three. And then, thank you for your opinion, but I don't agree with that. Like little things like that. And I don't know, like tell me a little bit about your experience with that. Is that how it came for you? Like when you had your shutdown, when your body just shut down and you said, I can't do anything anymore. Like what then led to you making the connection to the album, and then for ways to you to cope with or not cope, but to manage to reframe
Yeah,
things,
so
react differently.
kind of learning to be the watcher of your own thoughts, I think is a really great introduction. When you're able to start noticing maybe recurring thoughts or intrusive thoughts or old stories that keep coming up that you continue to put on yourself, those are really telling in where we really are at the nervous system level. So I would have these old narratives like, it's not worth trying because nothing is going to change. Um,
Mm,
but that was from, my youth and adolescence when I didn't have a voice that was valued in the home, right? But as an adult, I have my own family now and I have my own life now. And the things I think and say and feel do matter. So it's a lot about, you know, reframing those old stories and giving yourself the power um, to create and to claim space for who you are now. Um, so for me, a lot of my life, I just posted a piece on this morning on the freeze response, which is when your body just kind of shuts down during a conflict or a situation that feels unsafe. So when I was young, that was my go-to because anytime I would you know, try to respond or share how I was feeling, it seems to make things worse. So my nervous system learned that staying quiet was what was safer. And that followed me into my adult life. But it began to, hinder the relationships that are important to me. So specifically in those scenarios, I would, little by little begin to verbalize I am here in this conversation, but I can't respond right now. Like I'm feeling frozen. So even learning the terms for what is happening within our body, I think is a great first step in being able to respond rather than react. Even if we're having that physical reaction, if we can just communicate what's happening, I think that alleviates a lot of pressure right off the top.
mm. This is interesting. In that you sort of knew about the whole meta narrative before that became a thing. It sounds like you almost had that situation where you kind of step back from the whatever the situation is, where you're there, but you're also sort of looking at it from in a removed kind of way. And very recently, I've been reading a book called Reality Transurfing. I think the author's name is Vadim Zeland, and he talks about the same thing. He talks about they call it the meta narrative, where you're in the moment, you're in the situation, but you're able to sort of stand back as well. You're able to sort of be at a remove from things where you're both the observer and the person experiencing the situation and the emotions and all that. And it's fascinating how you did this years ago, and here's a book now, a fairly recently published book, talking about the same thing. And yeah, like so it's almost like the techniques have been there. It's just that now, I guess, with the acceptance of mental health issues and all that, this is information is sort of like making its way into platforms like Substack and maybe on X as well. I don't go to X very often, but I that's why I stay more on Substack, because I find the content more informational, more useful to you, whereas on X people seem to be just fighting all the time over there. Yeah. But yeah, like with me, it was a very similar thing. Like it was the whole idea of like saying like it is what it is, or you can teach an old dog new tricks. And again, like I accepted that, and I accept in the beginning, as a when I was younger, I accepted that. But as I get older, I'm like, okay, I don't like, I don't like how things are going. You finally, as men are always more stubborn about this. You finally accept, okay, yeah, I don't like how I'm interacting. I don't really like where things are going. I don't like the situation. So what if I were to take these things, try them, not necessarily commit to anything. You don't have to like advertise it or anything. Just for yourself, do a little experiment and try it. And I start finding that, yeah, you can actually, just like you said, by not responding to something, by not reacting immediately, you can stand back and say something. And it has the unintended psychological effect of like sort of disarming the other person. Like, for example, when someone is confrontational, by not reacting immediately, you begin to kind of draw a little bit from that sort of like a Clint Eastwood, like a dynamic of like in his westerns, where he just kind of stares at you and you don't do anything, and actually that begins to intimidate the other person. And I started noticing that. So that was also for me, it was important because first I found that I could make a connection to that. I could make a connection to movies. I've always been like a big movie guy, and I like men's action adventure. That's one of the things I post about. Like I collect vintage paperbacks and all that. And I can make that connection, like, okay, whenever you're feeling weak, just like what would Clint do? I would do something like that. And the second was learning about neuroplasticity. Like now it's a thing, but at the time it was a fairly new thing, and it was called something else. It had a very different name, but it was about completely rejecting those ideas that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like, age is not an issue. Like, you can be 80 and you can completely decide that you're going to be a different person. And yeah, like, the it is what it is. No, it is what you are thinking to a certain degree. Yeah, you construct your own reality. So that was very exciting to read about that, and that sent me down a rabbit hole of personal growth, reading books about personal growth. One book, one of the first ones I read that had a huge influence. I wouldn't say influence, but was like a sort of eye opener. Was Psycho Cybernetics. I don't know if you ever come across that book or
No, I
maybe read it.
haven't.
It's an old book, but the premise behind that is Malt Mal Maxwell Maltzberg, I think is the author's name. But the premise behind the book is he was a cosmetic surgeon. He used to do cosmetic procedures on people, and he started noticing the effect that his procedures had on his patients. For example, some patients, he would fix their nose or do something, and they would then they became very successful. They did great in life and all that. But with some other patients, nothing happened. It seems like he did the procedure that they felt was preventing them from presenting themselves at their best, but he found that nothing changed. They still had, they behaved the same. So he started researching that and going to the idea, well, it's not just the external. There's something else internal. There's a mismatch between the internal image they have of themselves and what the world sees. And now we can call that misalignment, that being misaligned in the context of now. So that book begins to explore that. He begins to research like Eastern philosophy and all that, and he comes to the conclusion that, yeah, like self-image matters a lot. How you perceive yourself matters a lot. No, it doesn't. You can do a million cosmetic things to yourself, but if that image you have of yourself, of maybe an ugly person, let's say, quote unquote ugly, I'm not gonna get into details with that, but or unsuccessful, or unlucky in love, or bad with money, any of these, which are stories, it's stories that we tell ourselves. If you believe those things, there's nothing externally that can be done to fix it. You can outwardly, you can be looking successful, you can make millions of dollars, but you lose them immediately through some bad investment or bad ideas because the internal image doesn't match that. So that was a quite a read. That was an impressive book that just, wow, like, it started me thinking how important, how crucial self-image is, how you perceive yourself is. If you don't have like a certain image of yourself, a self-image, doesn't really matter what you do externally. You can work out until you're like, 20-inch arms. You can just have millions of dollars, but you'll always be miserable. You'll always be unhappy because you have not fixed something internal. And that is harder to do because it's so ephemeral. It's not a measurable thing. Like, okay, yeah, you can tell yourself, I'm skinny, so I'm going to get jacked. That's a measurable thing. How to measure when you're free from these programs that cause you to react? That's a harder thing because in the mind it's all like cloud. It's just cloudy stuff. It's like ephemeral value. No, what am I trying to say? Yeah, just cloudy, viscous stuff. It's not like solid. It's not a thing that you can measure. So how to do that, I guess. And I like what you did, where you came up with the idea of distance, like putting yourself at a distance. And then from there, building on that. And in my case, I came up with the idea of using movie analogies, like who are my favorite screen heroes? What do they do? That wasn't 100% practical, but at least it gave me like the start. It was the start of that. So I'm curious, I
Absolutely.
guess, how that went with you.
Yeah, and it's, the mental exercises, especially because, they can't be measured, um, but reinforcing them is the same as building muscle like we would if we went to the gym or started working out. So when we replace, say an old negative belief with a new affirmation, we activate that neuroplasticity and we're able to physically change the neuron pathways in our brain. So learning about neuroplasticity really helped me as well. It kind of takes somebody out of maybe a hopeless place, and science backs up the fact that it's never too late. Like, we can change no matter what happened to us. We just have to put the intention and the diligence in.
Yes, yeah. It's like you said, it's working out. It's something that you have to like do constantly because if you don't um I came across the works of a personal growth coach who said what you do is you replace a certain set of habits with new habits. Because if you were to just try to get rid of the old habits and you'll just go back to those habits if you don't replace them with anything. So it's like you said, yeah, now you have awareness. I guess that's the first step, is developing awareness, catching on to these patterns and realizing that a lot of that is coming from your own brain, and then just finding methods to deal with that. Like in your case, doing that. And one thing that I learned a couple of years ago, I can't remember how I discovered the Silva method by Jose Silva. It's like a dynamic form of meditation. And I found out that they have like schools all over the place. And I'm here in New England, and I found one in Connecticut, not very far from me. So I actually went and I signed up and I took a 3-day intensive dynamic meditation session. And that was really cool. And one takeaway from that was, once you develop the awareness, is, catching yourself when you're in that space, when you're about to become reactive, because it's like a chain of thoughts. Like once you're triggered, it's like one thought, and that starts like a chain reaction of thoughts, of despair, of like hopelessness, of anger, of whatever. And it's immediate. It's something that happens so quickly that to pull yourself back from that, like before it can be too late. Before you're like, you already got violent, or you said something that hurtful, or you do something. And one thing that they teach you there is, whenever you find yourself that, just say cancel, cancel. Just say that, like you're aware of it, and you say that, and that gives you that pause that you're seeking. And that what that also does is, it kind of brings a sense of humor to that, because it's kind of a silly thing like to do. Like you say cancel, cancel, telling yourself that just kind of diffuses the situation. It's like you kind of laugh at yourself, and then like, what was I getting so mad about? Like, and again, you ask yourself, was this something really worth it getting so angry about, or so upset, or so like emotional about? So that was one great takeaway from that. And I actually haven't shared it much, but now that we're talking about it, I think I will do that. I will share that much because it's something. It's a useful, like, I call that an interrupter or a disruptor, something that disrupts that chain reaction of negative emotions that are triggered by one little thing, that it just creates the chain reaction that is very difficult to pull yourself from. So
Yeah.
it's an interrupter. It's something that disrupts it, and you can just take a breath and then just bring yourself to the moment. And okay, I'm good now. I'm good now. Like I don't. This is something that I don't really need to react, or if I do, I'm going to react to it in a way that comes from myself and not from conditioning or programming. So I imagine you
Absolutely.
have your stories about that
Those
too.
yeah, those interrupters are so important. And I think, that's a really great strategy to um implement as soon as, there's a phrase that maybe works for you, or even borrowing one until you find one or are able to pick up on your body's signals. Um, so what does it look like for you um after that happens? Like say you're in an interaction that is escalating. What does reacting versus responding look like?
I guess to use an example like that, like something that is escalating into like a physical conflict, let's say, something that I would have never done is I would not. I don't want to say confront because that sounds more violent, also, but I would not like say anything. I would just sort of slip into being nice, into being accommodating. And in time, I've come to the conclusion that that doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's unpleasant because of the idea of like conflict, like conflict, any kind of conflict, not just physical, violent conflict. It was just scary to me, like it was something that was, I growing up in like an abusive home, like and things like that. You sort of try to like please the person to try to appease their anger, but in general, that doesn't really do anything. Like if it just encourages the person to be more abusive because now they realize they can keep pushing and they can keep pushing and you'll just make yourself smaller and smaller. So again, I was partially drawing on movies, on like leading men who are cool and calm under pressure. And I would just say like, I don't want to argue with, like I don't like the situation. I don't like what you're doing. I don't want to get into an argument with you, but if you keep going like this, we will have to do that. If you're just leaving no other room for that. Like again, it's a way of n- trying to diffuse, but at the same time standing your ground, I guess. Because I imagine with women it's a little different. Like women are not immediately going to like fist like men do. So I'm curious to see how you deal with that. Because let's say you and another woman, let's say not with a man, because a man will likely not be that way with you. Like I don't think they'd be like immediately wanting to attack, assault you. So, but among women who have, not to be like mean to women, but women can be catty and underhanded in the ways they attack each other.
Yeah, so um, you know, reactions can look different for everyone, right? Like it can look like anger, it can look like defensiveness, it can look like shutting down. But the common denominator is that we are experiencing these body sensations that aren't um able to be communicated. So there becomes this fog of miscommunication between two people.
Mm,
So I think that, you know, when I'm in a situation where I'm feeling unheard or like my voice isn't being respected, I like to take a step back. And this is where boundaries come into play as well, because sometimes we don't have the words right away to address what's right in front of us. So even saying I need some time to step away and deal with this so that I can handle it appropriately goes a long way. And that, without further escalating the situation, lets the other person know that, you're having a reaction, but you don't want to do anything that will, further harm the relationship or the other person. So I think stepping away to check in and then really listening to, what your body needs and what you're prioritizing in your life now. And then returning to the conversation and saying, this is what happened and this is what I need, can be a really big tool.
okay. That I like the what you use, the idea of like in a cloud, like you're in a cloud of something, and I guess that's what happens in a confrontation like that. You're both in a respective cloud of anger, but anger that may have nothing to do with what's going on immediately. It could be something that happened decades ago that you're bringing into the present. Like it's a little difficult to like engage in that sense. Like you can have like a dozen micro traumas all just coming out into a head at this moment. And it's, like you said, how do you deal with that? I said, well, okay, say something that kind of diffuses the situation, but also maybe puts the responsibility on the other person. They're like, okay, like, look, I don't really want to do this, but you keep insisting. No, do you understand? Like, this is not good for either one of us. Like, you might kick my ass, but you're still going to get hurt. Like, is that what you want? Like, is that what winning means to you? Like a winning, like, well, I guess go ahead and do it, but it's on you. I didn't want to do this. Like it's a
Yeah.
little harder. Like I said, I grew up in Puerto Rico, so it's a very like macho culture where like the smallest thing immediately is a reason to like get into a fist fight, into fighting. And by fighting, it means like there's guns and things like that. So it's a chaotic environment, and that's part of where that comes from. The idea of like not wanting to engage or making yourself less and relying on humor and things like that to try to diffuse a situation. But it's a little harder to do that because there's something going on in there where like someone immediately wants to resort to like using guns and things like that. Like it's a little harder to get into, but at least within the confines of the workplace or in your personal relations, in your daily interactions with people, like you said, like that little pause and saying something that maybe puts a little bit of, how would I say, puts some sort of psychological distance, let's say, a little psychological distance. Like for a moment, maybe something gets through to people, that to both parties, and something that kind of diffuses the anger and the need to be right, which is really that's the foundation of things, the need to be right. We all have that sort of need to be right, or at least we're conditioned to believe that we have the right, we are right. So then you can just say something that maybe just creates a tiny little bit of space, and just long enough for like not necessarily to even say anything else, just to sort of just stop, like you said earlier, just stop and maybe, okay, like, do we really need to do this? Do we really need to keep this argument going, or take it further? Like, you know, do we have to? Like, maybe not, maybe not. So it's a little it's a thing that's hard to say, but those are things you can do. Those are things you can use. You can just sort of say something that diffuses the situation, but also um maybe put some responsibility on both of you, like puts on both people involved in the argument. It's something that, if I something practical, let's say, like, if I do this, let's say you're fighting with a coworker, like, oh, I could get fired, or I could get reprimanded from my job, or I could get suspended, or I could get arrested, and then I'm gonna have to explain what happened, and then you realize that what you fought over was like nothing worth fighting about. So something that kind of brings a little bit of like practical aspects of your life into it. And the moment you're so angry that you probably don't think about those things, but if you're able to just start bringing in that, or like you're with your kid, for example, like I don't want my kid to see me doing this, like I don't want them to get the idea, or him or her to get the idea that this is how adults deal with things. So just something
Absolutely.
that brings those practical aspects of life into the confrontation.
Yeah, and something else that's helpful for those moments too is sometimes just reflecting the situation back to the other person. Like, let's both take a step back. Here's what's happening right now. I stated my viewpoint, and, you know, without using a lot of you statements, because that often triggers people. But saying, kind of like painting the picture of what's happening right now can help the other person see the situation out of their own cloud of feelings as well. So if we kind of set the stage and, help one another understand that, this doesn't have to be a big thing. Let's really look and see what happened here for both of us. Then we're a lot more likely to find a resolution that doesn't escalate further into, you know, reactions from multiple parties.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it makes you both like potentially from people confronting each other into potentially you can become partners. Like you're both trying to find that solution, and it stays there. You can just simply do that thing where you both come away with something rather than taking away from each other. And like you said, like not bringing other people in, because who knows what baggage they're bringing into that situation also. Like someone comes say, "Oh, you should have stood your ground. You should actually push further." And like now potentially it becomes an even bigger thing because now you're bringing more people into it. So yeah, it's kind of like freaky to think about how potentially at any moment you could like explode into like a big confrontation. Like a thing could become this like a Hatfield and McCoy type of situation where like two families for like a century fighting each other.
Absolutely. And, like we were saying before, a lot of times it all stems back to the internal ideas we have about ourselves or old stories that we've kept or held on to for so long. And, we can't see into each other's worlds like that. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
assuming that, we know the full story behind, somebody's reaction is not responsible.
Exactly. Yeah. I apply that in little ways too. For example, like like how someone cuts you off in traffic and that might send you into like a rage. I used to be like that. Like now I'm like, well, maybe they're late for work, like and I should be grateful that I'm not in that situation. Like I'm not in a need to be at a certain time at a certain place. So I'm grateful for that. Or like maybe they received some bad news and I'm grateful instead that I'm no one I care about is dead. So I am grateful for that. Like and things like that. And then you can sort of bring some sympathy to maybe a little bit if not understanding, like you said, like just try to maybe get a glimpse into the other world because you don't know that it's just this casual interaction takes like a split second and you don't know anything, but that sort of gives you some perspective to not get angry now and then like gun it and go after the other person on the road or go in I don't know in line at some place at the restaurant or something like that. So it's something that you can use in many other ways, like in tiny little ways as well, like in other little aspects like that. Like I said, on the road or in a public place. Just it's something that you can use for anything. It just has thousands of little applications, as you go about your life and your daily interactions.
Absolutely. And that's, a really great thing about this skill set. Like you're saying, we can use it anywhere from like the smallest interactions to, really important relationships in our lives, whether it's traffic or whether, we're trying to tackle a tough subject with a family member. Um, a lot of the same techniques like pausing, stepping back, considering another point of view. These are all things that when we do them enough, we're working that muscle. And it kind of just becomes first nature after some time.
Yes, I actually see a great comment here. The bathrobe guy, robes. We do not punish with our anger. We are punished by our anger. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Actually, yeah, like an anger. It's interesting. In the book I was telling you about a reality transfer thing. They call whenever you're caught in some sort of emotional anchor, like in a big movement, like they call that a pendulum. When you're caught up in something that also has the energy of other people behind it. Like he uses the analog of sporting events. You know how like in a sporting event, like the whole stadium's excitement is directed at a particular player because he messed up the goal or whatever. So, but so there's the big that big aspect of that, like a crowd. On a smaller level, I remember reading a book called the Power of Your Supermind by Howard Vernon. I came across this little quote that said like what causes pain, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. What causes us pain is not so much um an opinion, but it's our opinion about the opinion. In other words, your thought about what someone else thought of you is what causes you pain. Like you agree with that because you agreed. And if you were to try to visualize that, going back to what I said earlier about why it's hard to do these things because everything in the mind is ephemeral. It's just like clouds. It's just like vapor. It's this thing that you cannot really hang on to. If you were to like try to represent that in visuals, is when you have, let's say, there's clouds in the sky and one black cloud represents something someone said about you, and you're standing on the ground and you throw hooks on that cloud and just hang on to that and you hang on to that. If you don't do anything, going back to what you said of just taking a pause and not reacting, the cloud goes on its way. And now you just have either a blue sky or just have just, fluffy white clouds. But you don't have that because you don't have that anger or that resentment because you didn't attach an opinion. You didn't add your opinion to what someone said. So it's that. It's and that's all the things that I share because again, it's so difficult to visualize these things because it's all in the mind, and the mind is just chemicals. It's just these clouds of chemicals. To visualize that, another visual is you're standing at the edge of a like a river, and the river is flowing peacefully, and a log goes by, and that log is an opinion of someone, something said about you and you just dive into the water to hang on to that log. Instead, just let the log go on its way and just watch the water and just focus on the flow of the water, just the peaceful flow of the water. and you'll be okay. It's silly again, but that's part of it. Like to bring a silly aspect of it, because often the things that we get worked up about are really nothing. It's just that
Yeah, I think
we may
that's a
have.
really great visualization as well. I think, um, that's something we didn't touch on is visualizations. That what a powerful tool when you're able to, create an image in your mind for what's happening. Yeah, I think for me, when I was kind of at the beginning of this journey, I would use like clouds as a metaphor or as an analogy, and that absolutely helped me regain control in the situation. So, if you're a person with a creative mind, um, you know, make up these metaphors or these images that help you kind of see in your mind's eye what's happening. I love the log analogy. That's a really good
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
You can just let it go
yeah. Because
by.
of that,
You
because
don't
of how
have to
difficult
jump
it
in
is to see
after
that.
it.
Yeah, because of how difficult it is to see that, but you feel it. Like you cannot see it. You may not be able to see what's happening. The reaction and your trigger, but you can feel the effect that if you choose to just take a moment, you feel how like your pulse goes down, your heart rate goes down. If you were wearing one of those like mood beats, it would go from like indigo to like a light blue. Like you would actually feel it. It's a hard thing to define, but you can feel the effect when you've done it. When you feel yourself, just serene. You don't feel yourself like anxious. You have this vague anxiety that you cannot connect to anything because you don't even know what it is. You don't know what triggers the anxiety. When you have that connection, you can say, okay, so this is giving me anxiety. I'm gonna say, no, I'm gonna let that lot go by and I'm just gonna focus on just watching the water and listening to the water flowing peacefully. Let me see this. Be like the pond. The sun comes and goes, and the pond remains the same. The rain comes and goes, and the pond remains the same. Yeah, great. Thank you. Let me see if I can see who said that. I think it's frozen, so I can give credit to who said that. But
Looks like
can
it
you
was
see it?
bathrobe guy again.
Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for that, whoever that is. I cannot see the person who posted that comment, but yeah, I mean, exactly, yeah. Like you're able to just sort of be a rock in, let's say, if you're in a turbulent water, like another visual, and you're this stone, and the water just goes around you. The stone remains in place, and the water goes around. Or you're an
Absolutely.
oak tree, and there's like a hurricane winds, and the winds might rip out the branches, but the trunk remains in place. And when the wind passes, the branches just grow out again.
Yeah, and the more familiar we get with
Oh, the
like our
bathroom guy. Thank you,
mind's inner
Rose.
workings, um it kind of opens the door to the somatics that I like to write about, like the body sensations, because that's a whole nother language in itself. So after we've kind of gotten a wrangle on responding versus reacting, um we have the ability to then tune into our body sensations so that anytime something physical is coming up for us, we're able to identify why and then implement the strategies that work best for us.
I think so. Yeah, that's almost like a discipline in itself when you're able to trace a trigger back to the source. Like I tried that with myself, and in the beginning I couldn't do it, but I started applying it like like the same visuals. Like, what if I were to apply that? Thoughts are like I don't know, like crumbs, and I'm gonna follow. Starting from this place, I'm gonna follow this crumb all the way back to the source, and you can usually find the source, and it could be something completely unrelated to what's going on in the moment. It's just that something someone said at the moment triggers you, and you take it back to that particular thing, like something that could have happened years ago. So there's that aspect of being able to trace it, and it's hard to do that. And I think part of that comes from not wanting to do that, like not wanting to go there because we're afraid of where it takes us. Like it takes us to some place dark. It could be it could be sexual abuse. Like when you were a child, like just really dark things. But you know, you have to go there. You have to take things to the source, because if you don't, it's like that quote by Jung. I don't know if you heard that one, or at least it's attributed to Jung, where I guess he says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you'll call it fate." That's a quote that I come across from watching YouTube videos. And it ties to what you said that, like as scary as it is, it's one of the most liberating things you can do for yourself to be able to trace things back to their source. Whatever is making you angry or upset in the moment or sad, if you're able to connect it to a typical to something, however dark it is, now you have a thing, you have a tangible thing you can work with. Like this happened, however humiliating or embarrassing or angering it is, you have now something tangible that you can say, okay, I want to do something about this. This happened. I want to reframe it in some way where, like that helps you see it in a different way that empowers you. And you're not ruled by this thing anymore. Like this thing just that happened a long time ago, but it's ruling your decisions in the present and it's costing you maybe jobs, it's costing you great relations, it's costing you having a more enjoyable social life. It's something that is affecting you. But if you first, I guess we don't know. There's the aspect of we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know that we don't have that awareness. Then comes awareness, and awareness comes in degrees because okay, I'm here now, I'm upset about something now, I'm gonna go back 2 or 3 crumbs to the source, and then from there, okay, I like how this makes me feel, I'm gonna go back a dozen crumbs to this source, and then maybe you come up on something so dark that you're afraid to go any further. But then after some time you're like, okay, I don't like how I feel, I don't like okay, I'm gonna go back 24 crumbs back from the present to the source, to whatever that thing may be, however dark or humiliating or painful it is. Like, I'm gonna go all the way back to crumb zero because I don't want to live this way. I don't want to be this way anymore. So there's
Absolutely,
that
and it
thing.
really
Yeah,
is a choice, to go back because and I think that's where a lot of people get stuck in their respective healing journeys is because, we can toe the water, we can dip our toes, but it gets scary, especially for people with complex or traumatic backgrounds. You know, for a lot of us, we spent our adolescence or adult lives trying to avoid all of that, right? But
absolutely.
it's
Yes.
only when we go back and, validate those formative experiences where we're able to find the freedom that, we've always deserved.
Mm,
Um, so even in my story, like I would have these recurring thoughts or habits that would come up when I would get, upset or a little depressed or feeling hopeless. And there was a moment in life where I was like, this is not who I am.
mm.
So, and it would just kind of all clicked for me where I was like, I have to go all the way back and look at the things I never wanted to look at before. And, I went into it with the mindset that this isn't going to be fun, but it is going to be worth it.
That's it. Yes. In essence, that is exactly the same thing. Like, as a teen, early 20s, I was again just trying to like cultivate the pose of like detachment. Like, no, no, like you try to put these things off, but as you get older, you realize, okay, like I don't really like how life is turning out for me. And could it be that, there's something I'm not addressing? Like when you start doing the work and start going to those places, I guess it's really scary. It's a really scary thing. But when you reframe it as, it's empowering because once you have that knowledge, you can do something to change it. But if you keep going, like sort of, how would I say, like just blundering forward and just ignoring it and just pretending nothing happened, we don't repress anything. Whatever you repress will manifest itself in some other way. It'll manifest as, like I said, health problems, tension, hyper injuries, or mental health issues. It'll manifest as something else. So it doesn't, you don't repress anything, we don't hold down anything, we don't push down anything. It always manifests in something physical or mental or a combination of both. So yeah, there's that aspect of like I said, just going to those places that you're afraid to look, which reminds me of the Joseph Campbell quote. He wrote about mythologies, mythologies and culture, and how there's a certain type that repeats across all cultures. And but there's a quote that I think it's paraphrased a little, but it says the cave you fear to enter holds a treasure that you seek, and you can to tweak it to what we're talking about how there's this cave that is really scary and you're afraid to go into, but it's the place that has it's holding the thing to your freedom. It's holding the thing that will make you free from I guess to use a word from Scientology, engrams, the things that are controlling your life. Yeah, like Scientology is something of a hot topic, but I'm actually it may sound weird, but I'm actually not entirely against Scientology. Like I remember reading Dianetics when I first started looking into personal growth. That the information wasn't as available. And I remember seeing the ad for Dianetics, the L. Ron Hubbard. It was like on TV ads. It used to be advertised on TV. And it was the only book that I saw that was addressing realize your full potential, um, deal with your hidden forces working against you. It was framed in a context that sounded appealing to me. So I read the book and I'm like, well, I'm not entirely in disagreement with what this book is saying. I'm not. There are some good takeaways. It's just that it got perverted into what is now in a Scientology. Like they kind of added that weird aspect of like a mind control and all that. But in some, I would say, argue, L. Ron Hubbard, when he was writing Dianetics, he drew probably from books that are better received, like for example, Think and Grow Rich or The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy, which is another great book that I recommend. That he probably drew from those books, and then he put his own spin. And then that became Dianetics, and then he added like Xenu, the mythology of Xenu, and all that. But I would say that there is some good things in there. It's just it got perverted into what Scientology is now. But there is some good there. Like there are some things that are good. It's just that the book is just leaning a little more in that side. But the other books that I mentioned, well, those are helpful too. Those are actually very good books too. When you realize, yeah, like we are ruled by programs, and often these programs were not our own choosing. Our parents put them there, teachers put them there, adults. Like when we're kids, we don't have a choice to do that, but as adults, we can do something about it. We just have to realize that we're not a kid anymore. Like we're not a child anymore. But our subconscious mind doesn't know that we're not like a 6 or 7 anymore. It's just simply still running that pattern from that age. So you have to acknowledge that as an adult that I want things to be different. I want, a life different from the one that I have now. And I guess it means I'll have to do some work. But rather than seeing it as like this scary thing, unless you're a fan of horror, if you're like a person who's big on horror, maybe you could look at it that way as a horror movie, like a I was gonna say like a Guillermo del Toro horror movie, let's say, because these movies usually involve children having to like deal with a dark aspect of themselves to then, be able to like function in life and become adults. You could look at it like that way. There's something in me that's holding me back from presenting myself at my best. So, and I'm a fan of horror, so I'm going to just see it as a horror movie, but you could see it as a great adventure, which is what Joseph Campbell, that's a framework under which Joseph Campbell talks about the myth, like as a call to action, a call to adventure. So you can see it as that way. You don't have to see it that way. If it's too scary to look at it that way, see it as an adventure and, do that. And the same reaction that you have where you said, this is not, you use something like, this is not my life, or this is not who I am. I mentioned that too because it was the same with me. I came to a realization as I start reading all the material. I'm like, this is not the life that I'm supposed to be living. I'm actually kind of living a fake life. Like this is not the life that is supposed to come for me. But for the longest time, I couldn't say that to myself. I simply felt that it was just that's how things are. Like things are what they are. It is the way it is. And suddenly one day, like I can tell myself that and mean it, and not sort of like kind of say it like this, kind of like no, like I can say it and no, like this is not my life and I'm going to change that. I'm going to do something about it. And again, I'm using movies. I'm using Clint Eastwood or like Mad Max. I'm using these screen heroes to sort of give me some framework, something that I can work from. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think we covered everything I wanted to cover with
Okay, yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and hopefully people watching and when this is gonna go online, so they'll get value from it. Ropes put something there. LOL. Sorry, I'm just very passionate about this. This is just a topic I am very passionate about. No problem, man. Thank you for your contributions, Ropes, and go ahead and engage with us, interact with us. Like Emily is more directly about that. I'm more tangentially discussing it as that applies to creativity. How your creativity is being held back when you play small, when you value the opinions of others, when you make yourself less to make other people not feel less. You hold yourself back. And creativity not just in arts but creativity to everything because if you treat your life as a creative work of art, then you'll want more for yourself. You'll want to do better things for yourself. You'll make different choices. So yeah, like go ahead and engage with us. So much, yeah. But well, thank you, Emily, for this hour. Yeah. Hopefully, people will get a value from this, and they can DM you, I guess, if they want more. They would like to hear more from what you have to say. And same with me. I am Robopulp on Substack. So thank you so much for your time. You have a happy, wonderful Sunday, and maybe in the future we'll do this again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I think this is a really important conversation. So hopefully everybody got something.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely, yeah. So so much. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen as well. Happy Sunday, everyone, and let's crush it next week. Bye.